What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go.
27-25 Bills win. I had a 3-0 weekend, which is rare because I've been awful this year. Listen, I feel so bad for Mark Andrews, I just think he's a tremendous player. I remember him in Oklahoma. Yeah. I thought that fumble to me, for Baltimore to come back down and score and have a chance to tie it after that fumble by Mark Andrews, and then the drop by Mark Andrews, which he catches 99 out of 100 times. Before we get into Lamar, this has been one of my favorite tight ends in the league. I thought that fumble, forget the drop. I thought the fumble, it felt like Buffalo didn't score until they got a field goal. I think it's on my notes here somewhere in the third quarter. I thought the fumble really sucked the emotion out of Baltimore.
Yeah, I think Romo had mentioned it. They had scored on essentially 3 straight drives. One of them was a kneel down at the end of the half, but Buffalo couldn't stop them. I mean, the game had kind of shifted. Lamar had settled down. They were running the ball right down their throat. That was, I think we saw tonight and we saw last night, the games were different because obviously this was much lower scoring than the Commander game. You can't turn the ball over at the rates in which the Lions and the Ravens did and lose and win the game. It can't. This is not basketball or baseball where it's a 7 or 5 game series. Your margin for error in a 60-minute game in a half, you could lose a game in a half. Yeah. And honestly, I thought when he threw the interception and the fumble in the first half, I'm like, I don't know if they can overcome that. But the Ravens have a good defense. They settled down. They started stopping Josh. Brady started kind of calling some lateral plays. But that Andrews, I'm with you. Mark Andrews is a stud. I mean, for him to have that fumble and that drop, it's hard to shake. I mean, you kind of become the GOAT of the moment.
Yeah, I mean, Lamar's going to take the heat because he had a multiple turnover game. I mean, Buffalo, I think, had 1 penalty and no turnovers. But it was also the fumble that Von Miller picked up. And so it was just, Mark Andrews drop, the Mark Andrews fumble, the fumble that Von Miller takes in. I thought Lamar played well enough, obviously one awful pick. I thought he played well enough to win. Hell, if Mark Andrews catches it, I would not want to play Baltimore in overtime because I thought they'd seize momentum in the second half. So I think Lamar will get tagged for it. But I'm not blaming C.J. Stroud for the loss in Kansas City. The Texans special teams were awful. They were like collegiate. Goff, he can take the hit. I thought Lamar wasn't as good as Josh Allen. One of the takeaways for me was they didn't ask Josh to do a lot in this game. It was a lot of passes to the backfield. I thought they came in, they didn't want it to be a Lamar versus Josh. I think they looked at the film and thought, we can kind of death by 1,000 cuts. They didn't ask him to make big throws much.
Yeah, to me, this is a coaching loss for the Ravens, just like it was last year against the Chiefs. It feels like when they played last year Mahomes and they played Josh tonight, they're obsessed with trying to prove he could pass. Early in the game, it's like you have the Shaquille O'Neal of running backs who, as they started running as the game went on, it's like, why don't you do this? And then what happened on the 2-point time the first time? They passed as they ran it right down their throat. It's like, why wouldn't you just hand it to him again? But you hit it on the nail on the head. I thought that this game felt like what the Steelers and Ravens used to feel like, right? It's like, okay, the Buffalo Bills said, we're going to be as tough as you. And sometimes that doesn't work for a pass-heavy team. We've seen it with Ohio State against Michigan. And I thought the first half, on their first drive of the game, they ran it right down the Ravens' throats, who their strength is their run defense. Yep. It's like, whoa, they are not intimidated. We know Josh can run, but how good were their running backs? Their line is not going to look like Saquon Barkley or anything in terms of yardage, but I thought James Cook was fantastic. The backup was fantastic, was awesome. And it sets the tone in these games. Like, this game was not going to be like last night. It was going to be lower scoring. Every yard mattered. Every first down mattered. And Sean McDermott deserves credit because his team came in physically ready to match the Ravens, who I think we all would have said are the more physical team, right?
Yeah, no, I think Davis, by the way, if you go read the life story of Davis, that running back, the backup running back, who is a big, strong kid,
Yeah.
It's his life is remarkable. He's bounced around, and it's so easy to guy to root for. But I wrote this down. I think Buffalo has a much better offensive line than people give them credit for. Now we know Philadelphia and Detroit feel like two of the best O lines in a decade, kind of like that Cowboy line Dak inherited when he was really young.
Yeah.
But I think Buffalo's O line. Now again, we know Deion Dawkins is excellent at left tackle, but I thought there were, one of the only times they failed to me was on that chance to wrap it up, and Josh Allen got stuffed near the goal line in the fourth quarter. That was one of the only times where
Did
I
you
thought,
like
okay,
him in the
they
shotgun there?
didn't and don't. I
No,
just
same.
don't. So that was one of the few, and he almost tried to lateral it, but that was one of those. That was one of those where they got stuffed. Listen, Sean McDermott is a little like Doc Rivers. We know he's a good enough coach, and Doc ended up with a title, but I find myself really wanting Buffalo to get to a Super Bowl because it's like we all know Lamar Jackson's a really special quarterback, but it's hard when Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes are in their prime and one of them's got Andy Reid. It's like, and by the way, Kansas City and Buffalo may have the two best front offices in the NFL, along with Detroit when it comes to drafting. Rams are pretty good as well. So my takeaway today, I liked Sean McDermott and Buffalo's game plan. I like how they were physical early. They didn't ask Josh to be Superman. It's almost like they prepared a game plan, John, expecting weather to be worse than it was.
The one thing though, to go back to Lamar about running, it's one thing to run into Mahomes when you lose to Josh Allen in this moment. I get it was on the road and you have multiple turnovers, and I will
Yeah.
defend his overall play. He was much better today than he was in that AFC Championship game.
Yeah, yeah.
But you get to the point where if he ends up with this MVP, and you and I both, I think, are on the same page here. I don't actually care about awards. You win 3 MVPs, you're on a short list of guys in this league.
Yeah.
You kind of become the James Harden of football really fast. And, I saw on Twitter, this is his fourth game in the playoffs where he has multiple
Yes.
turnovers. And
Yes.
those are type things that, listen, the interception, you can have an interception and then you can have that interception.
Right.
Right? It was like Jared Goff's pick six. It's like, Jared, where are you throwing this? That it's one thing to have a ball tipped or, a DB just make an incredible play. That when you hit guys in the breadbasket, it's like that can't happen. And then the fumble, it's like you're trying to do too much. Sometimes you got to learn to go down. I mean, that was a big deal with Josh tonight. Did not turn the ball over. They
Nope.
actually played the game, like you said, like I thought the Raven. I had the Bills tonight, and I had a decent amount of money on them.
Same.
And I got nervous as they started running. I was like, why don't they just run it nonstop? Because the Bills are not built to stop them. But sometimes it feels like, no, we have to prove. Final
Yeah.
drive, totally get it. But in the ebb and flow of a game, when it's 14-7 or 14-10, it's like, guys, your great strength right now is you have this Earl Campbell, Walter Payton player in the prime of his career, and your quarterback is, I don't know, the greatest runner in the history of the league. No call pass plays. I don't know if it's Munkin. I don't know if it's Lamar. Combination of them both. I would have ran it like they did against the Steelers 50 times. I would have. I never would have called pass plays until I absolutely had to, like the end of the game.
Yeah, in the third quarter, they had that Derrick Henry run, Justice Hill run, Derrick Henry run, then Derrick Henry for the touchdown. They had 68 rushing yards on that one drive in the third. And you're like, yeah, that's who they are. By the way, again, the Bills prepared like it was going to be a blizzard. They only passed the ball 7 times with Josh Allen in the first half. I felt like Baltimore. I felt like I got to give Sean McDermott credit. They came in with a plan. They're like, we're going to create physicality. We believe we can run on them. We're not, we don't know what the weather could get worse than we predict. And, Josh did his Superman stuff, but I really got to give McDermott credit. I thought what did they have? One penalty, no turnovers. And even when Mark Andrews dropped that, they still had time left on the clock. I mean, they had like a
Yeah.
minute 30 left on the clock. It felt a little like a Kansas City game where I kind of just felt, I really did, John. It's easy in hindsight to say this. I had Buffalo too. I really thought Buffalo the entire day was going to win the game. And I know a lot of people thought early, here comes Buffalo. They're more physical. But I just liked their game plan. I thought the Bills were really focused, laser focused on what they tried to accomplish.
Well, I think last week when we talked, I said, I think this is going to be a tough matchup for the Bills because the Ravens are so good against the run. And obviously, I would say, separating factor this year than in years past, and even at the end of last year, is James Cook. And it's just like, it's not easy to run it against these guys. And they can run it against you. And it's like, it becomes a time of possession deal. First drive of the game, the Bills had a long, after the Ravens went right down the field and scored. You're like, okay, this is going to be a shootout. The Bills went, they had 9 carries for 36 yards on that touchdown drive. And it was like,
Yeah.
okay, this feels like a Harbaugh brother in Sean McDermott. Like, I'm here for the fight. And
Yeah.
I think the Bills, remember when they've lost to Cincinnati and they've lost to Kansas City in the past, it's like they're not quite tough enough. And listen, personnel wise, they're
Yeah.
not as tough just because they don't have the bodies as the Ravens. But mentally and the way they showed up with the game plan, they showed up to play like that. And I think that really benefited them as the game went on.
Yeah, I feel bad. Lamar's going to take the hit, but on that Von Miller play, it was a really bad snap. In bad weather, that's a tough snap.
He was
And then,
dramatically better than years past in some of his
yes,
flops. He
yeah,
wasn't a couple bad plays, but overall, I thought he was pretty damn good. That final drive, it was like he looked like midseason Lamar.
yeah. So, I mean, listen, Kansas City, Buffalo is, I think, what most of us. I mean, I do think Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. I think we can say this now. And I feel bad for Joe Burrow. They had to sell naming rights to pay him. It is an antiquated front office. I mean, it's really sad. And Tobin, the GM, is kind of a powerless guy. So the Chiefs are -1.5 against the Bills. I'll take Buffalo +1.5. I took Buffalo +1.5 today. I think Buffalo's going to go into Arrowhead and win. They're pretty healthy. Boy, Milano again making nice plays. You know that guy doesn't get a ton of credit. Football people know he made a couple of big plays near the goal line tonight. So I think it's been established. Obviously, where you land matters, and Brady got Belichick and Joe Montana got Bill Walsh, but that's just the way it works. I think Josh Allen and Mahomes, to me, John, have separated themselves as the best two quarterbacks in the league. I like Joe Burrow a lot, but he gets hurt, and that's genetics are what they are. You get hurt, it's part of your legacy. And then I think the next tier of quarterbacks after those two starts with Joe Burrow, and Jaden Daniels may be right behind him. We'll get to that later in the podcast, but I kind of feel like I've watched these NFC teams, John. I do not believe. I think Kansas City and Buffalo are going to win the Super Bowl. One of those two. I just don't think Philadelphia is buttoned up. I think Washington's season will end. If it doesn't, they're just not talented
Yeah,
enough. Agree or disagree?
totally agree. This game feels like 49ers Cowboys 1993 at Arrowhead. And listen, the Chiefs are my people. I probably wouldn't be sitting here with you if it wasn't for them. I do think this is the Bills' year. I think the Bills are going to win next week, and I think they're going to win the Super Bowl. And for one year when I was with Philadelphia, Sean was there, and he's just, I mean, he's a really, really impressive guy. I think he's become a
Yeah.
really good head coach, and he hired the right coordinator. I mean, going from Dorsey to Joe Brady has changed their offense, but let's be real about this. The Bills, you know, if you look back when I was younger, Manning Brady was a rivalry, but up until 06, '07, Manning could not beat him, and Brady had 3 Super Bowls. That's kind of
Right.
what this feels like. Lamar Mahomes is not a rivalry. This is the third time in recent memory, and the Bills have lost these games, like last year, the overtime game where they went 3 plays and 50 yards or whatever. But this is the game. It's Josh versus Mahomes. And listen, you could make the argument because of the last lack of playoff success, we got to reorder this. Is it goes Mahomes, Josh, then Joe Burrow, and then Lamar Jackson. And the one thing, and you just mentioned about Joe Burrow, he does not have the infrastructure that Lamar has. I mean, the team that he took to the Super Bowl and went toe to toe with Mahomes in the other playoff game that he lost in the AFC Championship game, like, I'm sorry, like he's just accomplished way more. Now, I think, I use the NBA comp sometimes, like James Harden or Joel Embiid. In that individual sport, I would much rather have Lamar in football than if I was in basketball and have one of those guys. So I think big picture, I still think the Ravens can win a Super Bowl. But as we sit here in 2025, like it's been a pretty big letdown given a guy that, I mean, the guy could have like 4 MVPs and he
Yeah.
easily could get his third. So This is tough, but the Ravens put themselves in this position having to go on the road. They lost
Yep.
a terrible game to Cleveland. The second week
Raiders.
to the Raiders. That first half against the Chiefs, they didn't play very well. I mean, that Raiders loss was really, really bad. So, I mean, the Ravens and John Harbaugh put himself in this position.